Let's move to London. Let's speak to Sir Richard Dalton, the former British ambassador to Iran and to Libya and the former consul-general in Jerusalem. It is great to have you join us tonight, Sir Richard. Welcome back to France 24. Let me start by asking you your analysis of the first week of war. President Trump saying he's seeking tonight this unconditional surrender, nothing less. And Iran shows no sign, at least publicly, of diplomatic offerings. What's your reading of that?
Well, militarily, clearly, it's Israel and the United States who are winning this illegal aggression, this war of choice, and they are prepared to carry on for as long as it's necessary to bring a total end to missile and drone attacks, even if that takes weeks, and at the same time brushing aside the consequences for the region and the world economy, all of which were predicted and predictable. What we're seeing is carrying out a long-planned military so-called solution to the Iranian problem, driven by Israel, and in which the United States has gone along, having started an insincere negotiation in which, at Israeli request, unattainable objectives were set, such as a total abandonment of Iran's right to enrich even in minute quantities in the future. And this plan is being carried out. And the intention appears to be collapse of the Iranian state, risking thereby the many spillover problems which, again, were predicted and which European leaders are now starting to get worried about.
I want to get onto the points, and it'll be very interesting your perspective on European leaders in just a moment. I want to know, though, from your experiences as a diplomat over many years, you've been in post during conflicts in the Middle East in years gone by. Is back-channel communications likely to be going on right now? Is there some level of talking, perhaps in Geneva, or is there more likely radio silence for the moment?
There are plenty of channels. The problem is what to put down them, given the extreme position being taken by both sides. Iranians are in no position to advocate to their armed forces, to their people, a surrender, but a complete capitulation and admission of Israeli and United States dominance of Iran is what is being demanded of them. So, in the absence of intervention by a third party in a persuasive way, bringing forcibly to the attention of the United States and Israel the harms that are being done and may still be done, and the fact that there is a conceivable diplomatic off-ramp that meets the objectives of the United States in launching this war, without such a third-party intervention, the war will continue.
Can we talk about what could come next? And a reflection too on the killing of the Ayatollah. You were Iranian ambassador from 2003 to 2006. Did you ever meet Ayatollah Khamenei? And I can ask you, if you did or didn't, what you made of the court of the supreme leader, the system around him that could perhaps inform us about the key figures who could emerge as the influencers of this new era?
Well, I used to say to people that the way Iran took its decisions was very much like the way other countries took their decisions. There were committees, there were cabinets, there were specialists, there were organizations which fed through their proposals. These were thrashed out at a high level amongst the ministers, and if they could make a joint recommendation to the man at the top, that's what went through. The man at the top would probably agree. But if they couldn't agree, then the man at the top has to rule. Now, that's what happens in Downing Street or the White House, broadly speaking. Ambassadors in London don't see Mr. Starmer on an individual basis very often. And in Tehran, ambassadors didn't ever see the leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. But we had access to ministers in those days. British ambassadors don't have such access now, unfortunately. But there are ways of getting through, because the Iranian system is extremely good at channeling information at whatever level it's introduced to them, to the people who need to know it.
Were there figures that you know that are still around, perhaps you're in contact with from those days, that didn't like the regime, that would be candid with you, career politicians that you could talk to about what was really going on under the belly of the regime?
Very difficult to talk to opposition figures. One had ways of gathering what people who didn't like the regime were thinking, yes, but there was then and is now no organized opposition inside the country. Access to those who wish to reform the Islamic system, the reformist parties, was easier, but any regime run like Iran's is very sensitive to ambassadors dealing with anybody other than official channels.
Very interesting. So, Richard, let me ask you about Muqtada Khamenei. They're touted as a possible replacement, the son of Ayatollah Khamenei. What direction, if that was the case, and Iran saying hands off to the US, you won't be deciding who the next supreme leader is, what direction would that take Iran, do you think?
Continuity, but whether or not they will be able to rule the country depends on the length to which Israel and the United States go in smashing it up. Mujtaba, the son, is obviously the image of his father's policies. Once he had the reins in his hand, if that were to come to pass, of course, it's open to him and his colleagues to adopt a different course, justifying it in terms of the survival of the regime and of its religious mission. But I'm not sure why the Iranians should be in any hurry to appoint a successor. They have a council in place at the top level of 3 people able to confer and take decisions. But more important, the country has had a long time to prepare for a crisis of this kind. Authority is decentralized. There are many layers in the system able to take over and move up if top people are killed. So there is still plenty of steam in the boiler of the Islamic Republic.
You touched upon it right at the start, Sir Richard. I want to talk about the different messages within Europe on this conflict and how you read different European leaders in this hour, that reputations, that legacies can be made or lost. Tell me about, when you're looking around Europe right now, we've of course heard President Trump talking about Keir Starmer, saying he's no Churchill. What have you made of that?
Well, Trump is no Roosevelt, is he? You should listen to what the Democrats say about him. The word unhinged is used by very senior Democrats. And you can see from the innumerably different messages we're receiving how difficult it is for the American government to come up with a reason why they launched this now, other than long-term inveterate hatred of the Islamic Republic. The European leader who makes most sense is the Spanish Prime Minister. I think that given the pressures on him from the United States on the one hand and his domestic political situation on the other, Mr. Starmer is doing well. His actions and positions are well judged. I hope that Britain does not get involved in aggressive action against the Iranian government, but assisting in the defense of not just partner governments in the Gulf, but also British citizens spread throughout the area, seems to me a reasonable position. There is a platform forming for an intervention for a ceasefire if European leaders can get their act together and narrow the differences between them. That is based, for example, on what Kaja Kallas said about not wanting this war to go any further, wanting stability, what the British government says about the need for negotiations and for avoiding the further destabilization of Iran. And Mr. Merz is starting to move in that direction too. So given the prospect of severe disruption to the world economy and above all to our Gulf partners, given the sheer misery of the losses of life and the ability of the international community to obtain assurance diplomatically of there never being materials available in Iran for a nuclear weapon. And given the fact that the scale of the military assault now will contribute to secure containment of Iran in the future, the time really has come to try and call a halt to this, to de-escalate and achieve a ceasefire and a negotiated arrangement for the region, which would include not just diktat from Tel Aviv and Washington, but would incorporate the views about the future from Iran's neighbors, such as Turkey and the states of the Gulf Cooperation Council.
That's a very interesting point. Effectively, that by combining Europe, the petrol states, the Gulf states, Turkey, Iraq as well, you have this, basically Europe's voice. There is a wider voice in the room, that it's not just a back and forth between Iran and the US. There is a voice that has to be dealt with because of the sheer size. It's also, Sir Richard, the 80th anniversary, by happenstance or not, of Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech this week, warning of increasing measures of control back then in 1946 from Moscow. Fascinating in light of current events in Europe, Russia's influence in Iran too. And it's notable, Putin called it this week, the assassination of Khamenei, the cynical, quote, murder of a great statesman. He said it violated international law. Make of that what you will. The message clearly speaks to the art of Kremlinology and its current alliances. But do you see a Churchillian figure anywhere in Europe or on a world stage right now?
No, I don't. The crisis in the affairs of the British Empire and Commonwealth called forward a man whose public career began in the very early years of the 20th century, who had fought in the First World War, who had been a journalist before that in the Boer War, who was a master of British and European history, who had contacts all over Europe. He had the deepest affection for France. And no such figure can be created in the circumstances of the 21st century. But collective endeavor, including the European Union, is capable of moving mountains. I mean, we did see, although it may not be fashionable to recall it, a spearhead of the European movement trying to sort out this question in the early 20th century, the E3, Britain, France, and Germany, in consultation with the United States, in close consultation with the European Council, with the High Representative in active support. Now that effort eventually brought the Joint Cooperative Program of Action, the JCPOA, in 2015. Obama was, of course, absolutely right to join that effort in 2007. Or whenever he became president, I can't remember the exact year. And it was his authorization of back-channel talks with Iran in 2012, which led to the breakthrough. Now, Israel has achieved its objective, stated at the time, of sabotaging that agreement on the spurious grounds that it would enable Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. But of course, Israel has been, particularly Mr. Netanyahu, has been saying since the late 1990s that Iran was months away from a nuclear weapon. And President Trump has now picked up thoughtlessly and recklessly that chorus and repeated it yesterday with the lie that Iran was a fortnight away from a nuclear weapon. This is spurious, and Europe's voice is not strong enough in challenging the prevalence of propaganda. What happened in 2002 and 2003? The British government, the United States government, propagandized their own people to create a political case for the war that they wished to wage against Iraq. And look where that got us. Thank goodness Mr. Starmer is saying that the lessons of Iraq should inform what we do now with Iran. But the European leaders need to internalize that and stand up to warmongers.
Well, it is that lack of a European cohesive voice, isn't it, right now? Just a final thought, because somebody we haven't mentioned this so far, and given the spread of this conflict, a name that is worth a mention is Mark Rutte. An interesting case here too. The NATO Secretary-General, he's chipper, he's upbeat about the scenario. He says he thinks Washington knows what he's doing. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't know what he's drinking. Netherlands, of all countries, should know what follows when the rules of international order are jettisoned by strong countries. Now, I do sympathize with him in that his overwhelming priority may be to retain the United States' goodwill over Ukraine, which is such a massive threat. The war, Putin's war there, is such a massive threat to European security. But again, European leaders should be jogging his elbow to remind him that NATO, as a military alliance, has kept the peace, but it has done so because of the principles of international order which accompanied its creation, which the North Atlantic Treaty is all about. So in ensuring our security, if you're an exposed country, for example, the Baltic states, you need to walk on both legs, the leg of international law and the leg of military preparedness and, of course, the vital US role in that military preparedness.
So, Richard, very good to hear your thoughts tonight. Thank you. Sir Richard Dalton, former US ambassador to Iran and Libya, a UK ambassador, I should say, and the former consul-general in Jerusalem as well. Thanks for your time.